This is the Lean Builders Hoots on the Ground podcast with absolutely, positively no bullshito. Join us as we dig into exactly what lean construction is and how we can use these concepts and strategies in the field. This podcast will be different as we journey to job sites and mine the minds of lean builders, all in effort to pass forward building knowledge from those who have put their time in to learn a better way. Because that's just what lean builders do. What's up, y'all? Adam Hoots here, the Lean Builder Hoots on the Ground podcast, coming to you with no bullshito. And we got Miss Kabri Lehrman-Schmid. Did I say that correctly?
You got it.
Kabri, so awesome to have you here. I am a huge fan of yours and all the extracurricular work that you do, as well as just the work you do as a superintendent for Hensel Phelps. I would love to have you just introduce yourself to the Lean Builder Nation. Tell us a little bit about who Miss Kabri is.
Sure. Thanks so much for the opportunity. Hey, y'all. I'm Kabri. It's rare that somebody gets that pronunciation right, but Adam was right on it. I've spent over 15 years in the industry with the general contractor, Hensel Phelps, and I've gotten the opportunity to work coast to coast on about $1.9 billion worth of work. And most of that has been primarily in the aviation and higher education sectors, because I have found a niche in being able to identify the phasing requirements and communicate as necessary to high-risk stakeholders. And so I've just fallen into that and love it.
Interesting. Tell us, dive a little bit deeper for us. Where did the passion come from? What is it about the multi-phasing of projects, the complex? Dive deeper for me there.
Sure. In my career, I have played roles both on the office management side as well as the field management, being both project engineer and superintendent. But as I've grown to the position of lead superintendent, I've also played the role of design manager and scheduler along the way. Through one of my projects back at a different airport, the project had been canceled, and we had the opportunity, because the scope had gotten so large, to rebid the work and to work directly with the preferred designer. And I got the opportunity to team with them from the start, before we even had a concept of the design, and work with the airport stakeholders. And I found a real passion for the ability to communicate and then go build the project. And that was my goal at the time, that my 10-year goal was to be a lead superintendent that also does design management and get to roll in from one to the other with the preserved relationships and the efficiencies that you find in those constructability reviews. That's where I am today. I am currently in pre-construction on a project with a university in Washington, and my project starts in 3 months, and I'm the superintendent.
Wow. Our industry really doesn't allow for that a whole lot of the time. I guess, take me through prioritizing your time. Like, you mean to tell me that you're not finishing a job right now and you have the ability to actually start a new, fresh project?
The challenge is switching priorities between completion of design and assurance to the owner and design team, because this is an integrated delivery method, integrated design build. That handoff between my priorities of completing the design and starting all the mobilization planning and creating the schedule. There's definite value there for me being involved so early, but there's also a challenge of, well, I should be writing a bid package for a crane. I also need to go coordinate the crane installation.
Yeah, sometimes I guess that's like when the estimator takes control. Will you ever really get a project? I mean, you're planning this thing to the T's, where we're including the money that we should in order to build the job the way it should be built.
Yep.
That's huge. I hear you with the phasing and the kind of complex logistics and kind of making a niche there. Airports and higher education, both places I couldn't think of more risky environments, I guess I'll put it that way. Take us through kind of your journey coming from an office to a field. And I think that's kind of the HP way, if I've kind of caught on. And I love that, because to have that perspective of being in the field, doing the work, you know, surveying, field engineer, really putting time and effort into understanding what our people in the trades are going through and dealing with, I think is important. But how has that led to some of the other extracurricular stuff that you're doing, these eye-opening moments where you're like, wow, I need to do something about this?
Yeah, you do know some about Hensel Phelps, it sounds like. having the opportunity to start as a field engineer responsible for surveying, helping the superintendents understand where the crews are, even putting formwork in place in certain areas of the country like I was able to, that really steeps in you a deep respect and understanding of how to be a builder. And as we go pinging back and forth between field engineer, project engineer, and superintendent and project management, we are also a cohesive team because we understand what it takes to process submittals and turn in RFIs. And that lends to a better understanding of how the office feeds the field with material and how we all share that risk together. Having a deep foundation in respect for the trades and an understanding that it's my responsibility not just to be siloed in information, but to be able to translate between the management that I'm talking with my trade partners, to the craftsmen in the field, to the owners of the project, which in my case are usually, large city organizations or public entities. It all comes to communication. And the first aviation project I was on was really where I learned that I enjoyed translating that information between all of those different groups. That's what it comes down to in both position of, say, design manager and superintendent. It's how well can you communicate the information, hear what people are saying, and translate it to all the different priorities people have that are in the room.
Yeah, really understanding like what does this person value about the information that I'm holding, and trying to deliver that value, nothing more, nothing less. And sometimes that takes, changing your own person in order to deliver that information. I think that's a deep point. I love how you said steeps a deep respect, because as you're going through those motions and you're really understanding what somebody else is going through. I hear you talking about people a lot, and I know some of the work you've done on psychological safety, it's out there. I would highly suggest, if folks have any interest in those two words, which are seriously lacking in our industry, that you look up some of the videos that you've done. Real quick, you can drop a plug there. Where can we find kind of the best psychological safety type information that you've done out there?
Sure. I do have an article in Construction Executive about the role I feel field management plays to create a psychologically safe job site. There are also some great TED Talks out there that really spurred my understanding of psychological safety by Amy Edmondson, Brene Brown, Simon Sinek. They all tap into this idea that it's about understanding people, whether that's emotional intelligence, creating relationships, identifying values. For me, though, it was taking that message and applying it to construction. How do you take something that's so prevalent in the business, organizational management, organizational psychology, technology realm, and make it applicable on the ground in the field? What does that look like? That was my biggest kind of challenge that I worked through to get to where I understand myself to feel on that topic today, which is that I can impact hundreds of people in my day-to-day technical responsibilities. It's not this other separate discussion over on the side.
I love that. That's huge. Wow. I mean, it is, because you're right. Some people look at it as like, oh my gosh, it's this whole other thing that I have to do. It's like, no, time out. It's doing your job with care and respect for another human being. It's not something else. It's the way it's intended to be. And honestly, it's a lot easier that way. It's easier to get buy-in. It's easier to get, people on your side that just want good. Can you take us through developing like this culture of care on a job site? And what are those things that you do that really reinforce that, hey, this is a safe environment?
Absolutely. It comes from the very first interaction with your owners, your stakeholders, your trade partners, your engineers, saying that I'm here to work with you, to work together, to get to the same goal, project success. And it's saying that out loud. I often get responses when I go, let's say, to a general foreman of a deep foundation company, and I sit down and I say, let's look at the schedule. He'll be like, well, I want you to know that I have some ideas and that it changes what you gave me. And I'm like, great. And the response is, what? I'm like, no, that's great. Like, you're the expert. I don't do deep foundations all the time. Oh, well, let me show you. I'm like, well, that's a great idea. So you're telling me that shoring, having a consistent flow through shoring is less important than your deep foundation rig rental. He's like, yeah. I'm like, awesome. Now I understand your priority. getting to the point where people feel comfortable to not be defensive and to share what makes them successful. And so that's relationship building off the bat by acknowledging that you're there for that type of relationship, that you're relying on other people to provide input and value, and that you're acknowledging you don't know everything, which evidently used to be in very short supply in our industry, but people are
We're getting
talking a lot
better.
more. It's getting more complicated now. People need to know a lot of different things.
Absolutely. We're getting better. I think we still have a long way to go as far as that's concerned, but I think it's programs and like Anu, who you've introduced me to as well. It's things like that, just bringing awareness that this really does happen in construction. It may be still not the most common thing, but it is, we hire trade partners for a reason. That reason is because we can't do that work. And so in order to rely on them from a hoots on the ground perspective, you're in the right place. I heard you drop that earlier too. So we've got there and somebody feels like safe to speak up. Are we done there or?
No, it's a consistent commitment to demonstrating that you understand their best interests. So when you build that relationship, you're telling them that you're there for that conversation. But then you need to get over the hurdle of actually demonstrating that in the day-to-day processes that we're all responsible for. And that takes me going out of my way quite often to remind people of that by learning their scope completely. Not that I know how to do it, but being able to talk in the same language and ask them intelligent questions. And, especially being a woman in the industry, the very first hurdle I need to overcome is demonstration of capability, right? And that I can provide them value, especially as I've grown in my career, the need to demonstrate my ability to help my crews, that I will stand behind and support them and get information they don't have but need to be successful, has been the easiest way for me to start building those relationships because it builds respect. I was told very early on in my career, as an applying intern, I went to a university for civil engineering. My first internship was overseeing Hensel Phelps, the general contractor at the Pentagon renovation project. It's how I learned about construction. My family has no construction background. And I was told very clearly that my education was not valued and that I wouldn't learn anything in school. I had to learn it all with time in the field. And I found that to be true. You need to be humble and learn each step of the way. And so, back to your question of what does that look like? It's when you get into the weekly schedule meeting with your trade partner foreman, you're not coming in with new information. You've had conversations with each of them to gain buy-in and understanding about their needs. In that meeting, instead of saying, this is what you're doing or where are you going next, it's tying those commitments together because you've created buy-in and now they need to know how they're committed to each other, right? And so it's creating a language where people are introduced to talk to each other so that you have just a sense that everybody's in it together, and it's with the technical information to be the most productive, where the deliveries are, acknowledging people by name. And so when I say in all of your technical responsibilities, you can achieve creating psychological safety, it's taking everybody's priorities, each of their own goals, and making them known to the whole team. You can elevate that message so that every other person in that room knows why that person might be asking for what they're asking for.
Well, why? I hear you talking about. I mean, that's what lean builders do. They understand what is the value that these people seek. How are we going to deliver that in the most efficient and effective way? And help these people understand that they matter on the project. Not that they feel like they matter, but they actually matter. That was beautifully said. All the work that you're doing from a psychological safety perspective, and then how that actually goes further and impacts the mental health side of things. Maybe give some shout outs to some of the programs you're working with from a mental health perspective and everything else that you're doing there.
Sure. Many of your listeners have possibly noted that over the last 2, especially years, the topic of mental health within the construction industry has become more widely spread and recognized. We have a problem as an industry with the second highest rate of suicide in the United States, but COVID did a lot to blur the personal and professional line. And we started realizing that for people, were struggling with more than just the work that we were handing them and started talking about it. We have been overcoming the stigma of talking about mental health within our industry, the macho mentality, by introducing new topics. And you can't introduce new topics about mental health. You can't have successful programs or organizations that approach mental health unless people are willing to listen. And so that whole foundation we just talked about creating a safe space through the technical responsibilities, provides permission for you to start introducing new ideas and topics into the conversation. You have a ton of connections in your network, not LinkedIn network, just everyday conversations. You changing how you talk about one thing is easy because you're doing it in the context of the respect and the recognition you already have. And so the organization's working on it. Washington Suicide Prevention Team is working with the University of Washington's Forefront Suicide Prevention. There's going to be a module that's going to be tied to an OSHA elective training drop this summer that'll be widely available for mental health in the construction industry. Look out for that. It's going to be widely spread, especially through AGC of America has just started a consolidated group focused on suicide prevention because there are people working on this topic all over the country. University of Colorado Depression Center. Over in the Carolinas, it's CWPR, I think has done a great training module that they're working on with labor unions. The laborers union has taken on the topic personally and handed out dozens of packets on how to approach somebody who's struggling. constructionsuicideprevention.org. Right now, you can jump on there, free screening links. We've used those during Safety Week as raffles for people to go fill those out anonymously.
It's a good idea.
Yeah. Free posters, job site posters with suicide hotline information, toolbox talks, hard hat stickers. Who doesn't want a new hard hat sticker? Everyone wants a new hard hat sticker. I mean, ways you can tap into like the actual processes we already have.
I'm going to need you to send me some links for some of this stuff because I would love to put some of these in the show notes. I think it's so important. Some of the statistics that we have out there are just unacceptable as an industry. I think, again, being boots on the ground, I think both you and I can see that in real time. Why is all this so important to you, Ms. Kabri?
My interest in psychological safety, I mean, it's labeled psychological safety now. It's a new term that's come up in business over the last 10 years. But my interest in making connections with people unearthed information that you don't get on the surface, right? You learn more about people personally when you start to understand what drives them, and when they don't deliver what they promise, you understand more about the reasons that cause that. My care and my approach for dealing with people, which I'll be honest, has been in the past criticized by my management as, you should just stop caring about the drama of that crew. And I'm like, but my crew is the highest producing crew on the job site. It's not about drama, right? It's about relationships. Through my approach, building relationships, being humble, not having a big construction background that made me feel prideful or that I knew anything, relying on others to teach me. Taking the information that I've learned from other people and how you can tap into their strengths of information, that naturally makes you want to serve them in a higher way. For me, psychological safety addresses 3 elements. We already talked about one of them: production and success on the job site, mental health, and then inclusion. Now, our industry has been working on some of these topics over the last 5 to 10 years, right? Diversity and inclusion, it's everywhere. Every organization listening has probably had a diversity and inclusion element of their last 2 years, which is great. It gets people in the door. How do we keep them? We serve them better.
Yeah, we elevate them. We make them a priority. We mine their minds for what information they have, what they love, what they're passionate about, what we care about them personally. We challenge them directly to steal from Kim Scott's radical candor. You're speaking my language, but there is, and so I'm going to push back a little bit, from a job site perspective, some folks can start to take advantage of the fact that you do care personally. And so how do you manage that kind of balance of, look, we're here, but we still have a job to get done?
It's not about what this industry sometimes considers as being soft, right? I'm not changing my boundaries, my expectations, I am creating pathways by which I can better communicate those needs, right? I make a better schedule and I can communicate it in a way with the language the viewers are looking at, because everyone loves to read a schedule.
88 pages of it.
Exactly. Because of those relationships. I'm not taking away from those processes, I'm enhancing them. I have the ability to walk up to somebody and say, but you told me, and these are the steps we went through to get there. It gives me more information to challenge people on, frankly. It's not that I'm allowing anything different. I'm supporting more information sharing.
You've still got your standards that you're requiring people to meet, but holding them accountable or holding them responsible, maybe is the better way to put it. You're able to approach folks from a different level,
Yeah.
I think is kind of what I hear you saying.
It's not about being liked, right? That's not the goal of psychological safety. And it's not the goal of lean to be liked, right?
I'm
The
not
goal
liking
is
a lot of places.
it's to be able to take advantage of people's knowledge to create a better plan that serves all of those people. And that's the goal of psychological safety, but it's definitely built on relationships and built on my expectation of myself. I hold myself accountable for educating myself on the issues that might impact my people, being willing to be vulnerable about things. If I expect it of you, you should know that I'm expecting it of myself. And so connecting on a level that's a little bit deeper than, what's typically expected at a job site.
Yeah, that's huge. I think because oftentimes, especially in this industry, type A personalities, we're always looking like, what's next? What are we doing? What are they doing? Like, what's that? What's this? And we often forget about that self. And that's where things start, is internal. All things start with a thought. And then when you can visualize that thought, you can really start to drive action amongst a team. And I hear you, we haven't dropped the word yet, but the word trust belongs in this conversation hugely. Patrick Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions of a team. That level of trust is everything. And then you can, once you have that, then you can start having healthy conflict that drives commitments. You can hold people accountable for results. I love everything that you're saying. You're still got this level of, I'm going to care personally, but I'm going to challenge you directly. And that's everything.
That trust and respect, like, thank you for bringing up that word, because every step I mentioned about building that relationship and executing it at a job site level is about building that trust and respect.
I did a solo podcast on the word trust a couple ways back, and we don't often measure it. I've got some unique ways of how to measure via a trust circle, which is a whole lot of fun when you get the right folks involved. But you said it earlier, just things as simple as calling somebody by their name. Like, that goes so far, and you're the leader on the job site and you're walking by like, hey, George, hey, Kabri, hey, Michael, Michelle, like, how are things going? How's so-and-so, how's Johnny, how's George, and their kids and the stories, and then you're able to start bridging connections, and that becomes super powerful, because all of a sudden you're not the main gravitational pull. It's the whole job site's building this trust amongst one another. And then you start seeing the favors, right? Then it starts snowballing, and you're like, oh, now I can go do pre-con again. Okay. Maybe not that easy.
No, but you're motivating people to adopt that cultural expectation. You can see people on my job sites like change over time, right? Because they're not in like this defensive mode. Hopefully they're being successful on the project. But when they see that it's not like a favoritism, when they see it's just an expectation, and like you make those connections at first, then you can expect people to do it themselves. And you tell people that, like, go coordinate with. Of course, I've had the pleasure most of my career of working on mostly design build or GCCM projects where we're supported to have a much more collaborative environment. So I don't know. My first project was a hard bid job, and we created it there too.
I mean, it is. It's all about the mindset of the people on the project. Whether it's an IPD job or a hard bid job, you still create this culture where we care personally about each other, and we're going to challenge each other because the job is number one, and we're going to get it done together. And our industry misses that so much. We focus on resource efficiency instead of flow efficiency. We'd rather have 10 of 10 people working than have 8 of 10 people working and 2 people planning the next 5 moves. And that's a mistake. That's one of those counterintuitive approaches to the work that we often miss as builders. And just because that's how we've always done it. We've got a bottleneck, slam more people in the bottleneck. It's like,
Yeah.
no, like slow the people down before the bottleneck, get rid of the material and the bottleneck will move faster, and then go find the next one. Anyway, get me fired up on some production laws. That's a dangerous slippery slope for you, I'll tell you right now. Let me hit you with this question and see if anything pops up in your head. Okay. On this show, right, the word lean is often bothering people. The word culture really drives me bananas because it's, everybody has a different meaning for it. And until we really come together and understand as a team, we can't define it. And then how do you even measure it if you can't define it? And so those words really bother me. Is there anything out there, anything in the industry? It doesn't have to be a lean term. It can be like the word masonry. I know that bothers me sometimes. It's masonry. Like, oh my goodness, there's no A. What things out there just irk you, Miss Kabri?
Oh, goodness. I get a kick out of all those pronunciations. And I'll take this little sidebar to delay while I think about the answer to your question. When I was an intern at a federal prison in the middle of nowhere, North Carolina, we had some really great trade partners talking about their mechanical rooms. And I loved it so much. Like, it's just so endearing. Like, it's just different places and different people. It's just part of it. What word do I hate?
I can throw you a life vest if you need.
Life vest?
Yeah, a little help.
Yeah, throw me a life vest.
So how about what's a phrase or something like a constructionism that has really just stuck with you throughout the years? Maybe, I'm sure you've heard the beam stretcher or the sky hook, or are there any of those that kind of stick out in your mind as you've come up through the trades and in the field?
Like tricks to play on people?
You can call it that, sure. Or just funny things, funny sayings that have stuck with you.
Sometimes we'll use like the double-ended measuring tape.
Ooh, I like that one.
Tell a field engineer to go grab one of those.
Yeah, the old left-handed tape. I like it.
Yeah, similar concept. Looking around. But that's anti the purpose of creating a safe atmosphere, Adam.
Oh, yeah.
You want them to be able to be like, I'm not sure what that is. Could you tell me what like 10 penny nails are? Because I have no idea how to order that from Acme. Like, because I definitely didn't feel that. I had a general foreman who would just list the materials that were needed. And I'd be, I'm calling again because I think I need a bucket, but it's not called a bucket. Like, what is it called? And then I need a quarter bunk of, there's 3 letters. Okay, there's lots of 3 letters. What kind of wood do I need?
That's awesome. But that's that. I mean, you talked about it earlier, experiential learning, right? Like that, and so while I agree with you that maybe some of that's done in fun and harassment, but always, of course, from a psychologically safe environment, maybe even the lesson is, hey, speak up. Like if you don't understand what it is, then please speak up. I mean, I can tell you, I went on my fair share of hunts of things like that before as well. And that's kind of almost a passage thing, right? Like everybody kind of laughs at that, but it's experiential learning, having those awkward conversations with material vendors, not knowing, I remember my first job, I had to go up and tell a 76-year-old master mason that he had his brick wall in the wrong place. You know how hard that was for me
I do.
oh my goodness, it was awful. And that was my first experience. And my guys are laughing around the corner. And it's just like, how am I going to do this? But we did it. We got it done. And I approached it from hey, this is what we noticed. And can you run these measurements with me and show me how you got your measurements? And I've been
You're
wrong.
part of the ownership of it, right? Like you're using the we.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Be part of the solution you're asking.
Absolutely. Yeah. No finger pointing whatsoever. I think that's huge. And I'm doing it from more of an inquiry perspective and less of like, you're wrong, I'm advocating for my way. It's like, no, like, hey, I noticed this. Like, are you noticing the same thing that I'm noticing? Because I'm new at this, and being okay and being comfortable with that is really, really tough in our industry. Again, you alluded to that earlier as well.
I think it's really important in some way to let people know that the concept of psychological safety and building relationships, like, I don't want to call it just psychological safety. There is a passion right now running throughout the industry to improve what we love as an industry, but to make it more open to new people. Obviously, we have a labor shortage, right, as an industry. To invite people in because it's awesome. And we need to find a way to change that perception, help offset the fact that we likely work long hours and it's really hard and risky work. I just got out of a 3-hour crisis management training. My job isn't easy. I could not do the many hours a week, the time away from family, if I didn't enjoy what I was doing and feel impactful. That need is being talked about from coast to coast. Like, you're talking about it. There are other people talking about it. And it's every time I've spoken publicly or one-on-one about the concept of psychological safety, or talking in small groups on my projects about mental health or suicide prevention, I have never gotten somebody to walk out or tell me it was a waste of time. There is always a positive response from the people you wouldn't expect, like from my night scaffold foreman who took a half-hour extra lunch to share with his crew his own struggles with depression and mental health. It's not a topic to be fearful of, and it's not one to think that we're somehow degrading our quality or expectations of hardiness or lowering our expectations of hard work. Being able to create a better environment is now expected, especially by our new generations coming in. You're always being compared to the tech industry's benefits and how people are taken care of. We've always wanted to take care of our people because people are the industry's greatest assets, of course. It's how we get work done. And it's just starting to think about it differently. And there's now a ton of resources and people who talk about it. So who would you point people to find like this conversation continuing? Because it's not just GCs, right? It's not just owners, though I would argue that it needs to get further into ownership groups and cross the contract barrier.
Absolutely. There's a gentleman named Jackson Hoggard who's I believe he's in Winston-Salem or Greensboro, North Carolina, and he runs a historic window company, taking it over from his family right now. And he's on this push to where, like, hey, owners need to include money in contracts for mental health, training, mental health awareness, mental health days. Like, we need to work mental health days into our schedule. He's doing some pretty next level work as well on that. Would love to introduce y'all, but again, I love where you're at because it's deeper. People are everything, and I just did a podcast on respect for resources. And what I'm finding is, like kind of the psychological safety, it's becoming cliche to say respect for people. But when I can value the resources that are around that person and what resources that person needs and values to get their job done, then I'm showing a total respect for that person. And I really, really, again, I keep slipping back to this caring personally thing because there's something really deep there about making sure that we do care from an individual's perspective. People know when you're genuine and when you're not genuine, and even before you know it. And so I think it's important to just, again, elevating people. That's one of the things I love about the No BS tribe that you're a member of as well. Just showing up and people having each other's backs. And I mean, that's what lean builders do. And you're right, it's not an easy industry by any means. Nobody ever claimed it to be. In fact, that's why we have some of the workforce shortage. I guess, what is rewarding about construction to you?
I love sharing information that people weren't previously aware of. And that seems like kind of a random thing. You're like, well, how does that lend to success? Don't you care about like the projects you build? I am fulfilled by the impact I make by bringing people together. I'm not a social person. I don't mean socially at all. I mean like being able to connect what I learned from my drywall crew to my Miss Metals team and coming out of that with new information to continue sharing. It's like the impact that you make within your job site will follow you through a very small industry. I'm always crossing paths with somebody that I knew earlier. Like to create that web of relationships and respect for resources, you just kind of blew my mind with that. I just love that terminology because it's so related. It's less separate from this idea of like soft skills, emotional intelligence, leadership training. It's more direct and in line with our industry's valued metrics. I do want to comment on the gentleman you mentioned in North Carolina. I had a direct question after the last time I spoke about psychological safety in person. Somebody came up and said, I'm with a trade partner. What can I do here? Hensel Phelps, superintendent of my $100 million job site, can decide not to do night work or to respect the crews and not work overtime by collaborating with them on a better plan. Not changing boundaries or expectations, by using that relationship to find a different solution. But he said, what can I do? And I said, you need to approach the general contractor, whoever you're talking about, to talk about a new plan, to stand your ground for your people, to know your people well enough to know what they need, and to say, listen, my guys really need a break. This is what we're going to do to make sure that we meet your schedule. We always talk about schedule and plans. We need to get to the point where we're talking about our people in that way.
Absolutely. Making intentional time for self-care.
Yeah.
What kind of things do you do to take care of Miss Kabri to make sure? Uh-oh. Nothing. Uh-oh. Don't worry. I'm on this learning journey right now. So any answer is a fine answer. I'm sure you've got me beat, but like it's important, right? From a self-care perspective, what things do you do to focus on you to make sure you can still deliver? Because this sounds super demanding of you.
It is. It is. And then the passion to share it outside of work is additionally demanding. I need to do better as an individual to take better care of myself, but I truly do get a lot of personal fulfillment out of doing, especially the extracurricular associated work, talking about creating relationships. So I'm going to file that under the self-care for this conversation.
Hey, if it
Otherwise,
recharges you, yeah.
It does. Yes. Social connections, golf tournaments, no way. Hate that. Hate that so much. But being able to talk to people who are passionate about, the industry is always great, or to learn something new. Otherwise, my family and I like to go camping and canoeing.
Nice. The great outdoors. I love that.
Yes.
That's so cool. Where's one of your favorite spots?
Ooh, my boys are only 8 and 6, and they just got their first like mini kayaks. And so there's a lake out here in Western Washington. It's surrounded by beautiful homes that, I can't afford. But we go early in the morning, and if we're there by 9 o'clock on a Sunday, like it's swimmable, paddleable. There's like little like channels they can paddle down, and it's just so fun to just be out in the middle of the lake and watching them enjoy that. It's called Beaver Lake.
Beaver Lake, Washington, you said?
Yeah, I'm in Seattle.
I love it.
Yes. Don't make the trip for Beaver Lake. Make the trip for like the North Cascades and Rainier, and I'll show you some nice places there.
Sounds like a challenge right there. I like it. 6 and 8, I love those ages, and I couldn't think of a better activity to wear out a 6 or 8-year-old boys. You said, right?
Yep.
Yeah, you put them out in the middle of a lake. They can't put holes in any walls. It's a beautiful thing. So recently, I'm trying to get this podcast scheduled. You're super, super busy. One of the things you told me you were doing was a foreman graduation, like a foreman training program. Yeah. Tell me more about that, because that got me super excited. I'm dying to hear about how we can develop the capabilities of our people doing work.
Yeah, everything we've been talking about with psychological safety, with creating an environment that like values education and, gives people a voice, that's really great. But if the field isn't bought in, it doesn't work. And one of the challenges, historic cultural challenges of our industry, is that we promote our field management without preparation, right? That guy's the foreman because he put in the most lineal foot of wall track last year. Which, yeah, we're production oriented, deadline oriented, but we're becoming an industry where we're actually seeing the consequences through the mental health problems of our people not being prepared for that level of responsibility, not being equipped to communicate across a job site and to learn from other crews or to create a culture on their own crews. And so there's this great program with the organization called Arcade Wayfinding here in Washington. And they created a foreman and a project management basic training program. But the foreman basic training program, there's nothing basic about it. It teaches the technical skills of like production tracking, what you would document in daily reports, how you would learn a new technology. Some people still don't use a computer, right? So how you would go about learning more about Excel or whatever, how to document in OneNote. So technical skills, leadership skills, what it means to be a successful leader. Like, how do you delegate? How do you talk to your people? How do you go through orientation or a buddy system? It includes the critical piece of inclusion and how to be vulnerable and talk to people. I've had the opportunity to sit on a number, 5 maybe, of the graduations where, a class of 12 to 20 regional foremen or superintendents from 30 years experience to not even promoted yet have all said, this is the best course I've been in because it shows me the expectations and the possibilities for my position. And they're just so jazzed. And I'm like so excited to get them on my job sites because they're going to like shine well beyond their own trade, right? They're going to impact the whole place. We have to train our foremen. We have to equip them with that training. And yes, it's more responsibility, but we're damaging them right now. We're pushing them out. We're doing more harm. We need to give them more resources.
Yeah, far too long we have promoted based on technical ability and not taken those other things that you talk about, the emotional intelligence, the psychological safety, the willingness to be a team player, that trust, that vulnerability that you talk about. Again, that it just, for a long time did not exist. I like how you said historic cultural problem. Is that what you said?
Challenges, yeah.
Yeah, that was very well articulated, way better than I could have done. So thank you for that one. I couldn't agree more though. And to know you said RK Wayfinding, they're the ones leading the charge. I think I watched a video of you talking on one of their platforms as well. The things that you're doing are incredible. Again, I'm a huge fan. I got tons of respect for you, not just as a builder, but just as a leader in general. Thank you for what you're doing. You're definitely changing the industry in so many different ways too. Like you are one heck of a leader. I'm excited to continue to follow you and be one of your biggest fans. So thank you for everything that you're doing.
Oh, thank you for amplifying some awesome people in the industry.
That's what lean builders do. We elevate others. Well, thank you, Miss Kabri. I so appreciate you being on the show today. You definitely delivered some quality hoots on the ground, no bullshito content. Super happy to have you on board and look forward to just, again, following you and getting to know you better.
Me as well. Can't wait to listen to more.